wander over here to Morris, and quite a few different things happening on this. The fuel tank arrived. Concept Racing have fabricated that, which, as usual, they've done an amazing job. We use them for most of our more complicated aluminium fabrication work, so fuel tanks and radiators typically. That looks great. It all fits exactly as we hoped it would. The little recess works perfectly with the space saver spare. So that's good to go. Really happy with that. Adam's been making a start on the bonnet. We want to get that fitted so we can assess the space for the radiator top tank, so we can then get the radiator pattern off to concept for them to make that. So he's just doing a bit of a build-up on this. It's got these side mouldings that sit around here. We're just thinking about tapping these pegs. They originally just had like sort of spire clip metal clips that pushed onto these, which we're not really mad keen on. So we're going to see if we can, they're exactly 5mm, we're going to see if we can tap them to M5 and put nuts on the back. And then there are little side repeaters that sit through into this recess here, through the hole here, which Adam's going to be fitting, and then that'll be ready to go on. George has been working on the sort of glove box infill panels. So originally they were little flat down glove boxes. We want to put some flat panels in place there which are not openable, but they do need to be able to come out if we need to access things. So we've designed some panels that are going in there. They're going to be machined in aluminium, and the way they're going to fit is they have little pegs out the bottom, little 4mm machined pegs that sit into some rubber grommets we've drilled and put rubber grommets in the frame at the bottom, so they'll sit in. At the top there'll be a bracket with one or several magnets at the top, and the inside of the cover panel has a little steel strip inlaid into it, so you can basically shut it and it magnets itself shut, and at that point it's not going to come open. There's nothing to pull on to get it open, but if you do need to get in there to access, you can put a little pick tool through the gap, twiddle it around and pull them out, so it's possible to get them out, but they're not obviously an openable item. So that really has been the thing we wanted to get done to allow us to put the rest of the dash together. So once we've now done the holes that mount those, got a plan in place for all of that, George was literally just offering up a 3D print of the final design on those. And then that now means we can get in there and get the heater box installed on the left-hand side, which takes up almost all the space on the left. We've already got the PDMs in there. With the heater in, we can finalise the wire routing behind there. We can then get the aircon refrigerant and heater water pipes finished, get the instrument cluster in, and just start building from there really. We get the lower dash section in. The carpets are ready already, so Dean's going to bring those over next week. We can get those offered up and check the fit of those. The centre console can go in, and on the subject of the centre console, we've got some machine bits through. So this week one of the things that arrived was the cordless phone charging dock, if you like. So there's just a tray, basically a machine tray that's going to be black anodised that sits in that console. It's got a recess in it for a cordless phone charger, so you just put your phone in that tray. It holds your phone but also charges it while you're driving. I'm trying to think whether there was another machine part arrived for this. What was that?
The door locks.
Yes, that's it. Well reminded. Yeah, the little lock sliders. So to operate the door locks from inside, which are now mini door locks, we're doing some little sliders. There'll be a vertical rod to the central locking motor, but we wanted a way of locking and unlocking the doors from inside manually as well. So we've done some nice little machined bezels that will sit sort of vertically at the back of the door card with a little slider handle, which then actually connects onto the vertical rod that goes to the locking motor. So they look good. They'll be sent off to be anodised. And speaking of the door cards, James has been carrying on with the patterns for the door cards. Now we've got a confession to make there, in that last time I think we were talking about the 3D scanning. We 3D scanned it all, and we're going to do them in CAD. It's the first time we've done a 3D scan to make a door card, you know, exactly the right profile with all the holes in the right place. But it turned out to be a bit of a pain in the ass, and we're not quite sure why, but we got to the point of cutting a template and various bits weren't quite right. I don't know if it was the translation between the scan and a 2D surface, which might have perhaps flattened out the slight curve of the door. I'm not actually sure if that's what was the cause or not. But one way or another, it wasn't quite right. And actually, we just, on this occasion, just thought, let's just cut our losses on that one. Revert to the simple technique of just cutting a paper template to match and marking through where the holes are. it was a nice idea, and it's definitely one we'll pick up again in future, because it does mean that once you've got that pattern on CAD, you can just replicate it. So if you did another car the same, for instance, or wanted to, you know, maybe you made a mistake on making the door card further down the line, making another one is very quick, which is often the reason that we're making things in CAD or drawing things in CAD rather than just hand cutting them, and that is one of the biggest reasons, particularly in the sheet metal. People often sort of question why we would draw just like a two-dimensional sheet metal panel to when we're just doing a repair panel, and it's not so much that it's quicker to draw it in CAD and CNC it for making one. You could hand make it in probably the same time, but the problem arises if you hand make one and then you want to make some changes to it, you've got to do it all again, whereas with the CAD one, all of the work goes into the drawing part of it. So once you've made one, if you make a mistake or it's not quite right, it's very quick to edit it and make another one, so you save the time in the long run. Anyway, yes, so door cards paper templated. We're just working on the fastening method for those, and that, I think, is where we're at in here. Morris made a little bit more progress. I think actually I was involved with fitting the windscreen on this on the Monday. We've been doing some of the wiring routing, getting the wires terminated in the doors for the window lifters, for the central locking motors. I've made a start also on the Monday on the steering column switch controls. We're running a PDM, it's ECU Master 1 in this case, which controls all the electronics. And one of the things that needed a bit of a change is we're using MX5 switch gear on it, and the intermittent control is actually integrated into a little circuit board on the switch gear. So I started but never finished. It's probably on the desk where I left it on Monday, to disassemble that and basically pull the board apart and change it so the switch is literally just switching to the various outputs to the PDM rather than having the integrated intermittent on it, because our PDM will control that. So that was one of the things we were working on. We've made up some sub-looms for the instrument panel to connect that into the main loom. For something else, what was the other thing we were doing? The central locking controller. That's another thing where we basically are unable to get the connectors that go directly into those things. So we use a quick make connector on the loom and then make a little intermediate section with the wiring that's provided with the instruments or the central locking controller. So that's good. We've got some of the billet parts arriving for this. I think the mirror corners will be next week, but we got through the bonnet latch plates. We're basically using the sort of latching pins and springs from the Mark 1 Golf, but we've done some really nice little billet base plates for them, because we've deleted the safety latch from that. So originally it was just a kind of crudely modified version of our original Golf one, but we thought we'd do some nice billet ones. So they're here. George has finalised the design for the infills now completely at each side of the dash. They go into some little pegs in rubber grommets at the bottom and then magnet in. They're being machined shortly as well. So hopefully over the course of the next week, loads of cool bits arriving for this, which will then allow us to totally finish off the interior and get it. It's going to take shape remarkably fast, I think, that car. Morris. Bonnet's on. I wanted to get that on, been meaning to want to get that on for a while actually, but on now so we can finish the radiator design. So there's a fabricated steel frame in there, and we just need to model the shape of the top tank before I send that away to get that made in aluminium. And I wanted to get the bonnet on so we could see what space we've got, because I want to have quite an enlarged sort of central top tank on there to give us quite a bit of expansion space. And obviously with the shape of the bonnet on this, you've got a big space in the middle to extend that up into. So that's on. God, what was the other thing? The dashboard. We've now received the infill panels that George designed, which were machined by Andy at Concept 303 very nicely. They look absolutely stunning. Again, the 3D scanning setups proved its worth. The fit of them is exceptional. And they are, although at a glance they look like they're a flat panel just with a ridged design around them, but actually the entire panel is slightly curved and in two planes as well, so it's a kind of compound curve with a slight twist and a curve this way on it. So they've come out really, really nice now. They've got to go away to be anodised, but other than that, they're ready to go in. And then the only thing actually at the moment that's holding us up is these tanks here. I'm waiting for these to be machined. That's just a 3D print, and there's another one on the other side, because those bolt in from the inside of the bulkhead. So I need to get those bolted on, and then I can put everything else behind the dash, and actually the interior will go together pretty quick then. So dash panels here, just waiting on the tanks, and then we can progress. Other thing might be worth briefly mentioning is we've painted the space saver spare, and got the fuel tank in. So John was designing and making up the straps here. They're very simple design, just a metal strap that anchors the fuel tank down to the mounting points that we incorporated previously. So that's pretty much done. He's also done the vent line on the tank that basically allows air to vent in and out, and he's just about to start doing the second vent. So there's two vents. I've probably talked about this previously on fuel tanks. Because the neck is, or the cap is not vented, we have a small vent which allows either air out when it gets hot and it expands, or when you're actually using the fuel it needs to allow air in. So there's a small vent pipe for that. But then there's also a much larger vent pipe which just connects to the fuel neck, the filler neck, at the sort of uppermost part of it, right near the top. So when the fuel nozzle, when you're filling it, is in there, it goes down below that. So when the fuel tank is rapidly filling up and air needs to come out, rather than the escaping air trying to come up the filler neck and blowing the fuel back and clicking the pump out, the air that's escaping comes out of a vent in the neck right near the top, above where the fuel nozzle is. So it stops it kind of kicking back when you're trying to fill it. So we're just making up the lines for that as well. So yeah, that's where we're at with that.
The other area of progress has been on the Morris, where George has been doing a bit of work getting the lower dash fitted, so that and with the steering column, because we don't have the correct steering column shroud for the steering column. It's an MX-5 steering column we're using, but there's some peculiarity, and I don't know all of the information on this. I'd be corrected by somebody on this, but there's a peculiarity with the particular column we have and the switchgear that we have, which means that none of the shrouds that we've had with the columns actually fit. But quite apart from that, they wouldn't fit the dash anyway, so we would have to probably cut them off and make an intermediate piece, or completely redesign the shrouds anyway. So what we've decided is we're just going to put all the switchgear in place, put the dash in place, and then scan that area, and then George will draw the shrouds and we'll 3D print them, which is just going to be an easier, it's a little bit of work, but it's probably an easier solution to the problem of getting that column shroud to look right than any other way of doing it. So George has been on with that. He's put the lower dash in, got the scanner out, and he's got the Peel 3D scanner out and had a good go around the steering column, and I believe he's now upstairs beavering away with Fusion, trying to come up with a column shroud design. So I think that's where we're at on that. I know I'm going to have missed something on this. Yes, sorry, yes. Jamie's going to have to prompt me on a few things here because he knows what he's filmed and I've totally forgotten. You may recall 3 weeks ago, something like that, James fabricated the brace that braces underneath the diff on the rear subframe that ties the two wishbone mounts together effectively, gives them a bit of extra bracing under the diff. That hadn't been powder coated at that stage. It now has, and that's now been fitted as well. John's got that fitted, and I think that is then pretty much where we're at with the Morris. There's been
Morris. John's been on that a fair bit. He's buttoned up the remaining fuel plumbing underneath. Last week he was finishing off the fuel vent plumbing and doing the brace bar, or trial fitting the brace bar that sits on the subframe. He's just finished the fuel plumbing to the pump, because we couldn't do that until we'd finished the tank. So basically the tank to pump plumbing and the return line that goes back to the tank, which go underneath. He's finished those, and then we've been mocking up the prop shaft. So because it's essentially all MX-5, but the rear subframe has been brought forward by, it's somewhere in the order of 2 inches compared to an MX-5, and we did that by modifying the backbone that joins the gearbox and the subframe to allow it to come slightly closer. Consequently, the prop's a little bit shorter than an MX-5 prop, so we've just tacked up cut and shut basically, and tacked up as a mock-up a spare MX-5 prop we had, and we're now going to send that along with an original one to Dave Mack Props in Coventry, who do all of our prop shafts, and they'll basically properly shorten the standard prop to match the length of our mock-up prop. So yeah, looking forward to getting that back, and actually with that back and that brace back on, I think that's almost all of the underside stuff buttoned up. So yeah, we're looking good on that. I'm just waiting for those billet tanks in the engine bay, and that will allow us to really bash through a load of progress on the interior then. James was off last week, so there wasn't any more progress on the E-Type, but we'll pick that one back up next week. George is literally in the process of trial fitting the column shroud for this, so that's been the bulk of his work for the last few days. I think he was just scanning that whole column area last week. He's now finished the design, I think, that column shroud, done a 3D print of the lower one. The top part of it's about to go on to 3D print. We've just offered that up and it's all looking good. I think we might make a slight revision, and that's the beauty of the 3D print, that actually once you've done the design work, the manufacture of the part's relatively cost-free. Cost effective, I should say, not free. So yeah, it looks great. The only thing was the column, it looks like you've got to shift where the switch gear, which mounts the shroud, attaches to the column itself. It looks like that needs to be pulled very slightly out, because at the moment, and he hadn't spotted this before, the horn contact, there's like a spring brass contact that touches the back of the boss. It's actually just a few millimeters off the boss, and when you move the thing far enough up for that to contact, it then opens up a little bit too much of a gap to the dash. So we're going to make a slight revision and reprint that. Then do the upper shroud, and we should be good on that. Overall design looks great. Big one on this, finally, the tanks that have been machined. So the screen wash / power steering tank this side and brake fluid, clutch fluid tank on the other side, they came back from being machined. Very quick offer up to make sure they were right. We did the drilling and tapping on them for the unions that go in the bottom, just because the guy machining them was a bit pushed for time, hence why they've taken this long to get here. And they've gone straight out for anodising. So they've gone along with things like the glove box infills that we've done previously on this, various other things, the little mirror corners. So when we get that lot back from the anodising company, should be early next week, I'd have thought. That opens up loads on this, then we can do the full door builds, get the glass in. We've got, in fact, that's another thing, we've got the custom glass back for this now. So we'll be able to crack on, get the door builds done, all the window regulators, glass in, those little billet corners, get the frames on, get the mirrors on. Then once we've bolted the tanks into the engine bay, everything behind the dash can go in. So that's like the PDO and ECU mount this side, complete all the brake plumbing there, get the heater and aircon unit in this side, get all the pipe work in for the demist vents, dash vents, get the instruments in the dash, then we can fit that lower dash section for the final time. And that basically is the cornerstone that then leads to everything else being possible. We'll be able to we can get the headlining in. We could do that now, in fairness, but everything else, the carpet, the trim panels, everything else really hinges on that. So looking forward to making some big progress on that. Another thing on this is the fuel filler neck, which we showed previously. That's gone for anodising, so that can go on. That'll complete the fuel plumbing. So yeah, quite a lot of exciting sort of getting towards completion jobs all around, really. On that note, Morris, few avenues. George finished his design for the steering column shroud. They've been 3D printed. We're using 3D prints as the final parts there, so they've now been sent off to Dean, who's upholstering those, probably as we speak. Other interior jobs were, Rich was doing the rear bulkhead panel, so there's a subwoofer that goes on the rear bulkhead, and we wanted to make a sort of surround for it that will all be wrapped in leather, so it looks more integrated into the design of the interior. So Rich has made that, and George has been on with interior design stuff as well, further to the column shroud. The door sort of handle pulls / armrests. We wanted to basically get the design nailed for the door card entirely, and how there's going to be like a line of piping that runs around the dash and on the door cards and flows all the way around into that rear subwoofer surround panel. So we were just trying to nail the exact look for that. And then that leads on to the shape of the door pull armrest, which we've now pretty much settled on, got a 3D model done. We've just got to do a 3D print of that, check we're happy with how that feels ergonomically. And if that's all good, and the owner's happy with that, we'll go ahead, print the other one, and then we can get the door cards finalised in terms of getting the holes in them for those handles. And then we can leather the handles, leather door cards, the rear trim panels can be leathered, all of that rear bulkhead bit. And then that's basically all the interior upholstery ready to go then. At the moment it's looking a bit forlorn because we had a bit of a disaster. This is one of those working on car swearing moments. We were just doing some wiring termination and we were checking which of the two switches on the gearbox, neutral and reverse, was the reverse switch, so we could put the appropriate termination on our loom. And we discovered that it wasn't switching when you selected reverse. And it transpires when Nat did the tail housing swap, so it's an NC box with an NB tail housing, which allows you to move the gear shift forward. One of the things they revised on it was the reverse switch position, so everything is the same, except a little bit of the casting on the selector fork that does fifth and reverse is slightly different and suits the reverse switch in a revised position, which he hadn't noticed. So it wasn't touching the reverse switch on this housing. So we've just had to take the gearbox out and swap that. It's basically just roll pinned onto the selector shaft. So swap the little selector fork from being the NC one to being the NB one, which now matches the reverse switch position. But that is the only change. And I think they did it because the reverse switch is almost impossible to get out in the old position, and on the NC box it's straight up from underneath. So yeah, we'll have all that back together tomorrow with luck, and looking slightly less forlorn, and we can carry on with the exciting stuff.
Billet tanks.
Yes, Jamie's just reminded me that the other thing which we were waiting for quite a while was the tanks that go in the engine bay, which arrived. I think I did mention they'd arrived in the last episode, but they'd gone away for anodising. They're now back for anodising and fitted, which means we can crack on with getting all the heater and all the stuff in behind the dash, which we would be doing now, I think, if it wasn't for the fact that we were dropping the gearbox out. So that's done, and also I finished the mock-up radiator, which has been sent over to Concept Racing. Again, they've got a good shout out this episode, haven't they? To do the final radiator fabrication for that. So hopefully we'll get that back soon. We'll have the radiator in then, and then we can button up the coolant plumbing. Oil plumbing I think is already done, so we can pretty much finalise the plumbing. We were in the middle of doing the wiring, finishing off, which is why the gearbox reverse switch issue was found. So yeah, things should... The Morris, John's just on primarily with fitting the heater unit. I think last time we were at the tail end of a load of trauma where we had to take the gearbox out. So that's all back in now. Happy with how that's all gone. We've done a few other little jobs that have been on the cards in the engine bay. So the water rail was one. We were struggling on positions for water temp sensors. We need one for the instruments, one for the engine. And the positions on the water rail where you would normally put those were interrupted by the exhaust manifold. Now we've found there was a sort of flat plinth on part of the rail where we were able to drill and tap for the gauge sender, but it's too close to the side of the rocker cover to fit the ECU sender in there, so we took it off and welded a little boss on the back part on the top of the sender, top of the rail, so we could put the ECU sender in there. And then that was stripped and repainted crackle black. So that's another little job ticked off in there. John had, although he's removed it at the minute, John had the instrument cluster in, which looks really nice. I'm so happy with how that's come out. That's from Classic Instruments. I think it's more or less one of their standard instrument packs, and we basically refabricated part of the dash, well, the part where the speedo goes, that's slightly bigger to compensate for the fact I think it was maybe half or quarter of an inch bigger than the original Morris one. But that then has your telltales, indicator, main beam telltales, oil pressure, coolant temperature, volts and fuel level, and speed and tacho all on that one unit. So that looks smart in there. He's actually took it out at the minute because we're just going through the incredible trauma of trying to route the aircon and heating ducting behind the dash, and we knew this was always going to be awkward because the space behind the dash on this is tiny, and we've got not only all of the master cylinders back there, we've got 2 power distribution modules, we've got the engine ECU, we've got that whole heating and aircon unit, and then we've got the water hoses to it, the refrigerant lines to it, the valve for the water hose, and then we've got to get ducting to the demist vents and ducting to the main dash vents. Now, we had it all mocked up when it was at metalwork stage, and it all kind of looked like it was going to fit in place, and I think it will, but it's incredibly tight to work behind the dash. looking at the back of the car, we've got the little machined number plate lamp / reverse camera housing on that we made a while ago. And I think once John's finished what he's doing on here, the next steps are going to be to start getting more of the interior together so we can get the lower dash in now. Once that lot's in, start working on getting the carpets, console and headlining. We've also got the little anodised corner pieces that sit at the front of the door. They hold the mirrors and they also sort of form the front part of where the glass run is. So I'm looking forward to getting all that lot together because, of course, it's that total transformation to single piece glass with those integrated mirror mounts on. Quite a lot of work, so I'll be excited to see the culmination of all that work. Slightly nervous that it all works correctly, but hopefully electric windows, single piece glass, it's custom glass, and the mirror mounts integrated into it. So fingers crossed that all goes to plan.